Welcome to the Water Street Functional Plan presentation. This presentation will discuss the background behind this project, describe existing conditions, and provide an overview of the proposed design options that are being considered for the Water Street corridor. Here's the presentation overview. We'll talk first about the background, then we'll look at existing conditions. Then we'll show you some of the proposed design options, then we'll talk a bit about streetscaping and enhanced public spaces, before finishing up with the project schedule. The Halifax Regional Municipality is completing a functional design project for Water Street that will inform future changes to the corridor. Functional plans are the first stage of redesigning a street. The study area here includes Lower and Upper Water Street, from Terminal Road at the bottom of the map to historic properties at the top of the map. This project will provide a corridor-wide vision for Water Street based on its current and future needs and based on policy direction from various land use and transportation plans. This project will help us to identify potential design options for the corridor that attempt to improve the quality of transportation infrastructure for all users. The design options typically identify opportunities to address gaps in the active transportation infrastructure. For example, disconnected sidewalks, or gaps in the transit network, for example, bus lanes. This project will also help us to understand the potential implications of the different design options on the street functionality. For example, impacts to on-street parking, impacts to the right-of-way, impacts to private property and utilities, among many others. Recently approved plans, including the Integrated Mobility Plan and Halifax Transit's Moving Forward Together plan, make clear HRM's intent to continue to invest in Water Street as a key component of the regional transportation network. Water Street is an important pedestrian corridor given its significance from the perspective of being a hub for tourism and civic events. Water Street is also designated as an All Ages and Abilities AAA bicycle route, confirming its role as a key link in HRM's bicycle network. It is also designated as a transit priority corridor in both the Integrated Mobility Plan and Transit's Moving Forward Together plan. Transit priority corridors are streets where the movement of buses is prioritized over that of general purpose traffic. In recent years, Water Street has seen significant development activity as residential densification of downtown Halifax has rapidly increased. The recent 2021 census indicates that downtown Halifax is now home to over 25,000 residents, growing by over 26% since 2016. With anticipated new developments on Water Street, like the future Art Gallery of Nova Scotia and the Kennard development, densification in downtown is expected to continue to grow. Development intensification introduces new mobility demands to the street that need to be considered. The intensification also provides opportunities to integrate street improvements into development-related street reinstatement. This provides cost synergies and reduces construction disruption. With several impending developments on the horizon, a comprehensive plan will be critical to successfully integrate improvements to Water Street with developments to avoid missed opportunities. As a signature street in downtown Halifax, Water Street presents many exciting opportunities. However, given the many demands being placed on the street, the planning for its future presents some challenges. This project will look at developing design options for the Water Street corridor that balance multimodal demands. This includes improving the accommodation of modes that are currently underserved while maintaining adequate operations for those that are served well. The next slides will provide a summary of existing conditions. The existing cross-section varies along the corridor, ranging from single-lane sections as narrow as 4.5 meters to two-lane sections up to 10 meters wide. Most of the corridor has a typical 9.1 meter curb-to-curb width that is allocated with a combination of general-purpose traffic lanes, on-street parking and loading, and a tactically protected on-street bicycle lane. There is also sidewalk on both sides of the street in most areas. Water Street is an important corridor for walking, rolling, and cycling. Running parallel to the waterfront, Water Street sees considerable pedestrian activity, including tourists exploring downtown, Halifax commuters accessing the harbor ferries, and downtown residents and workers going about their daily activities. Water Street experiences its highest pedestrian volumes during the summer season, with over 5,000 pedestrians per day and over 100,000 pedestrians in a month. The majority of the corridor has sidewalks with acceptable widths. However, there are critical pinch points at Prince Street and at historic properties where sidewalks are reduced below acceptable widths or are discontinued entirely. Water Street is also a key link to HRM's bicycle network. It provides a northbound connection for cyclists that pairs with the southbound cycling connection of Hollis Street. In 2020, a tactical bikeway using temporary materials was installed on Water Street. Water Street is part of an envisioned all ages and abilities (AAA) bicycle network for downtown Halifax. This vision includes protected bikeways on Water Street, Hollis Street, as well as on Terminal Road, George Street, and Morris Street. The two photos displayed on this slide show the two locations along Water Street where the sidewalk is narrowed below acceptable widths or is disconnected. The image on the left shows the pinch point at Prince Street. Limited right-of-way between the existing buildings has contributed to a very narrow sidewalk on the west side of the street. The narrow sidewalk is made worse by the streetlight standard obstructing the sidewalk, which further reduces the amount of clear sidewalk space to less than 1 meter, making the sidewalk inaccessible. The image on the right shows the pinch point at historic properties. Similar to the pinch point at Prince Street, closely spaced buildings at historic properties just before the Cogswell interchange has resulted in a constrained right-of-way and inadequate pedestrian facilities. The sidewalk on the east side of the street by historic properties is narrow and further constrained by metal bollards, and the sidewalk on the west side does not extend to the Cogswell interchange due to an adequate width. The street has a varied streetscape, including up to 11 different combinations of street treatments. You can see the variety of treatments in the photos displayed on this slide. In addition to a dated look and feel, the various surface materials have created a disjointed experience that can be difficult to navigate for those with visual and mobility issues. In addition to being an important active transportation corridor, Water Street is designated as a transit priority corridor. At present, not many transit routes run on Water Street. However, with forthcoming service changes in the Moving Forward Together plan, the MFTP, Halifax Transit is preparing to increase Water Street's importance in the transit network, increasing service from 3 to 13 routes. The 10 additional routes will be express routes and will only service Water Street during the afternoon peak period, between approximately 3 and 6 p.m. The addition of these routes will increase the number of buses traveling along the corridor from 10 buses to approximately 37 buses during the afternoon peak period. The number of buses running along the corridor during the morning peak period will remain the same, at 10 buses per hour. The express buses are anticipated to run along Water Street's one-way pair, Hollis Street, during the morning peak. Given the planned growth in transit service along Water Street and that traffic congestion impacts transit travel time and reliability, Water Street was designated as a transit priority corridor. As such, opportunities to provide priority to buses over general traffic through the use of transit priority measures such as dedicated bus lanes and transit signal priority have been considered as part of this project. Water Street is an arterial roadway that runs one way northbound. It forms an arterial one-way couplet with Hollis Street, which runs parallel in the southbound direction. A 24-hour traffic count indicated an average daily traffic volume of approximately 4,900 vehicles per day. The average speed along the corridor is about 31 kilometers per hour. Speeds are consistently low during the daytime period, likely due to factors like pedestrian crossings and slow-moving vehicles. The majority of on-street parking and loading is on the west side of the street today. There are about 44 on-street parking spaces between Morris Street and Sackville Street. There are also 4 lay-bys, 2 of which are used for parking and 2 are for tour bus stopping. There are several off-street surface parking lots on the east and sides of the street. HRM's center plan encourages the redevelopment of surface parking lots and restricts any new surface parking lots along Lower Water Street. Recent and planned developments on Water Street have continued the trend of infilling surface parking lots, including the upcoming relocation of the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia to the Salter Block. Over the next few slides, we will provide an overview of the proposed design options for Water Street. Water Street is being redesigned using a complete streets approach. This approach considers how the street functions as a destination or place as well as a mobility link and aims to improve comfort and safety for all transportation modes. The project team recognizes that Water Street is an important corridor in downtown Halifax, and through different policies, we have identified a need for key improvements that will enhance how people use the corridor to move within and through the area. Using the complete streets approach and based on policy direction, we have established some key design objectives. These include enhancing the pedestrian realm and public spaces by improving the connectivity, functionality, and the quality of the pedestrian infrastructure, recognizing Water Street's historical character and importance from the perspective of being a hub for tourism and civic events. Opportunities to improve the street's aesthetics by making streetscaping improvements, for example, adding trees or street furniture, are being explored as part of this project. The second design objective is developing a continuous all ages and abilities AAA bicycle facility that provides a dedicated space for cyclists and includes features that improve safety, comfort, and convenience. The third design objective is implementing transit priority measures, for example, dedicated bus lanes that allow buses to operate more efficiently, particularly during peak travel periods. The fourth and last design objective is continuing to accommodate the movement of vehicular traffic, including heavy and oversized loads. Using these design objectives, the project team developed 2 functional design options for the Water Street corridor. Option 1 is the transit-focused option, which prioritizes transit improvements along the street. Option 2 is the pedestrian-enhanced option, which prioritizes improvements to the pedestrian realm. The following slides will provide an overview of the design elements included in each option. These design elements are applicable to the majority of the corridor, with the exception of the pinch points discussed earlier at Prince Street and at historic properties. Due to right-of-way constraints, there is only one possible design solution, which we'll present on the next slide. The design options will also not apply to the segment between George Street and Duke Street, where the Water Street Transit Terminal is located. The design drawings for this segment are provided on the project's webpage. As mentioned earlier, there is only one possible design solution for the 2 pinch points at Prince Street and at historic properties. The proposed design will widen the narrow sections of the sidewalk, connect any missing sections, and remove any obstructions that may be impacting pedestrian movements. The first functional design option we'll go over is option 1, the transit-focused option. As a reminder, this option prioritizes improvements to transit along the corridor through the addition of transit priority measures like dedicated bus lanes. This slide shows a typical cross-section for the transit-focused option. I'll describe the diagram from left to right or west to east. The design elements I will be talking about will be highlighted in red on the screen. For the off-street elements on the west side of the street, this option would include a wide sidewalk and a buffer separating the sidewalk from the roadway. This buffer provides opportunities to add streetscaping elements like trees, lighting, and benches. One key thing to note with the options I am showing you today is the curb on the west side of the street will most likely remain where it is. For the on-street elements, this option would provide a two-lane cross-section that includes a mixed traffic lane on the west side of the street and a peak period bus lane on the east side of the street. This lane would accommodate on-street parking and loading during the off-peak periods only. In other words, on-street parking and loading activities would not be permitted during the commuter peak periods when the bus lane is operational from approximately 3 to 6 p.m. For the off-street elements on the east side of the street, the waterfront side, this option would accommodate a buffer separating the bicycle lane from the street. It would also include a raised unidirectional bicycle lane similar to what is currently in front of the Queen's Marquee development. This option would also accommodate a sidewalk buffer that provides opportunities to add streetscaping elements. And finally, this option would also include a sidewalk. This slide shows the plan view of the cross-section. This slide shows the benefits and drawbacks associated with this cross-section. Starting with the benefits, this option achieves the transit priority objective by implementing a peak period bus lane that would improve transit travel time and reliability. This option would accommodate on-street parking and loading on the east side of the street, the waterfront side, during the off-peak periods. There will also be space to accommodate enhanced bus stops and space for aesthetic improvements by adding trees. In terms of the drawbacks, this option would not increase the sidewalk width on the east side of the street. This option would provide the minimum ideal separation between the sidewalk and the bicycle lane. This option would relocate on-street parking and loading that is currently located on the west side of the street to the east side of the street. On-street parking and loading activities would not be permitted during commuter peak periods. This option would take away the ability to provide curb extensions or bump outs at intersections with Water Street. As a reminder, in the transit-focused option, this cross-section would be applied to the majority of the corridor, with the exception of the pinch points and the segment between George Street to Duke Street. The second functional design option being considered is option 2, the pedestrian enhanced option. As a reminder, this option prioritizes improvements to the pedestrian realm and public space along the corridor. This slide shows a typical cross-section for the pedestrian enhanced option. I'll describe the diagram from left to right or west to east. The design elements I will be talking about will be highlighted in red on the screen. For the off-street elements on the west side of the street, this option would include a wide sidewalk and a buffer separating the sidewalk from the roadway. Similar to the transit-focused option, this buffer would provide opportunities to add streetscaping elements like trees, lighting, and benches. For the on-street elements, this option would retain a single travel lane and it would include on-street parking and loading on one side of the street. In this option, on-street parking and loading can be strategically allocated to the east side of the street or to the west side of the street, depending upon where parking and loading demand is highest. This option would significantly increase the amount of off-street space on the east side along the majority of the corridor by narrowing the street and reallocating street space to the pedestrian realm. This option would accommodate a buffer separating the bicycle lane from the travel lane. It would also include a raised unidirectional bicycle lane, and it would include a sidewalk buffer wider than the buffer presented in the transit-focused option. The wider buffer would also accommodate more pedestrian amenities like public art installations and larger public seating. This option also tries to maintain or increase the width of the sidewalk on the east side of the street. This slide shows the plan view of the cross-section. This slide shows the benefits and drawbacks associated with this cross-section. Starting with the benefits. This option would significantly increase the amount of space allocated to pedestrians. It places a high priority on enhancing the pedestrian realm and making meaningful streetscaping improvements, recognizing the importance that Water Street plays in downtown Halifax as a pedestrian street. This option would increase the separation between the sidewalk and the bicycle lane, reducing the likelihood of pedestrians encroaching on the bicycle lane. This option would allocate curbside access to the side with the highest apparent parking and loading demand. This option would accommodate curb extensions, bump outs at the intersection, which would reduce the crossing distance for pedestrians. This option would provide additional space for enhanced bus stops, for example, space for bus shelters. One major drawback to this option is that transit priority would not be accommodated. This would have an impact on transit travel time and reliability. As mentioned earlier, as part of the Moving Forward Together plan, more routes will run on Water Street during the afternoon peak period from 3 to 6 p.m. These changes would increase the number of buses that would run on Water Street from 10 to 37. Without transit priority, there would be potential impacts on transit's reliability. In the pedestrian-enhanced option, the existing cross-section between Prince Street and George Street would be maintained. The pedestrian-enhanced cross-section would be applied to the rest of the corridor, again with the exception of the pinch points and the segment between George Street to Duke Street. This slide shows the cross-sections for both design options for comparison. In summary, the proposed changes to the west side of the street is the same for the two design options. For on-street elements, the transit-focused option has a wider roadway that accommodates two travel lanes, one of which is for a peak period bus lane. The pedestrian-enhanced option, however, retains a single travel lane and provides on-street parking and loading in areas where apparent curbside access demand is high. For the off-street elements on the east side of the street, the pedestrian-enhanced options would increase the amount of space allocated to the pedestrian realm and public space beyond what is being proposed as part of the transit-focused option. One of the main challenges our project team has faced is trying to prioritize all design elements on Water Street and balance the needs of all the different users. What we realized through this project is that we can only choose 2 of 3 categories to prioritize along the corridor, and that not everything can be a priority on Water Street. We could either get transit priority, make some improvements to the pedestrian realm and public space, but we would lose curbside access where it's needed. Or we can get curbside access where it's needed and make meaningful improvements to the pedestrian realm and public space, but we would lose transit priority along the majority of the corridor. We would love to hear from you what you think is an acceptable trade-off. Streetscaping is an important component of our project. It impacts the experience of pedestrians and other street users. It has the power to animate and support a street's function as a destination and as part of the public realm or public space, through elements like trees, lighting, street furniture, and public art. Given Water Street's historic character and importance from the perspective of tourism and civic events, aesthetic appeal is particularly important. As part of this project, we will be proposing a design guideline for the future reinstatement of the pedestrian realm and public space. These guidelines will recommend surface treatments, plant palettes, furniture selection, and also identify public spaces along the street. Over the next slides, I will go over some of the proposed streetscaping elements and the proposed enhanced public spaces. West side of the street, we are considering applying the downtown treatment for the surface materials and furniture. This would be similar to what is in front of the Alexander Building by Bishop's Landing today. You can see an example of it on the photo to the right. Today, the west side of the street includes a sidewalk that is buffered with boxed and raised planters that have trees. These raised planters have decreased the amount of clear space that is available to pedestrians, making it harder for people with mobility issues to navigate. As part of this project, we are proposing to remove all the raised planters on the west side of the street and replace all the trees with trees and soil cells. These changes would increase the amount of clear space that is available to pedestrians, making it more comfortable to walk or roll. On the east side of the street, we are considering various surface materials, including the surface materials applied in front of the Queen's Marquee development on Water Street. We are also considering various seating options for individual seating or group seating. We are mostly looking at adding wooden furniture because it allows us to treat the east side of the street as an extension to the waterfront. This slide shows some additional seating options, including potential seating with lights to help activate the space at night. Considering that there are a lot of restaurants and cafes in the area, the increased lighting could help activate the space further. Note that some of these options could only apply to the pedestrian enhanced option, as it would have the ability to accommodate the size of these enhanced furniture pieces, whereas the transit focused option would not. One additional improvement to the east side of the street for both the transit-focused option and the pedestrian-enhanced option is to increase the number of trees. Today, there are a few trees in our right-of-way on the east side, but as part of this project, there would be opportunity to add trees along the east side of the street, resulting in a net increase in the number of trees in this area. There may be opportunities to expand the public space more extensively in select locations along Water Street. These public spaces could serve a variety of uses, including enhancing people's experiences, providing locations for public art installation, public seating, and small performing areas to host events like the Halifax Busker Festival. We have identified these locations as enhanced public spaces. One of those enhanced public spaces is at the corner of Water Street and Salter Street. The images on this slide show the existing large planter that is currently in that location. This planter has caused some accessibility concerns as the sidewalk is located behind the planter and there is no sidewalk along the street. As part of this project, we are proposing the removal of this planter, and instead we are looking at opportunities to create a public space, like a mini plaza or a gathering node, recognizing that this node acts as a gateway to the waterfront from Spring Garden Road. This is just one example of the proposed enhanced public spaces along the street. We are seeking feedback from you on how you think these spaces should be used and what kind of elements you think would make a successful public space. Should it include benches, trees, public art, flexible space? Let us know what you think. Finally, I'll give you a quick overview of the project schedule. We have completed a detailed review of existing conditions. We have explored conceptual design options. We also completed the first phase of stakeholder engagement, which focused on the loading activities of the businesses in the area. We have also developed functional design options. So these are the options we showed you today. And we are now in public and stakeholder engagement phase of the project. During this phase, we are seeking feedback from the public and our stakeholders on the proposed design options. This feedback will help inform the preferred design option. Over the second phase, we will finalize the functional design option, and finally, we will be recommending a preferred functional design option for Regional Council to consider. Thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. We encourage you to provide feedback on the proposed design options by responding to the online survey, which can be found at ShapeYourCityHalifax.ca/Water Street Corridor. If you have any questions about the project, please feel free to contact the project manager, Lean Romanet, at the email address displayed on the screen.